Hello, everybody. We are here today for an important webinar. We're going to present this great opportunity for those that labor and dedicate their lives to the protection of the environment. So we can protect the environment, and at the same time, we have great challenges to give meaning to our work, and also opportunity to do business and grow our profession, our companies. So we'll be presenting here a little bit different than we have done in all the webinars. It will be focused on what are the business opportunities, and at the end, a very tiny portion of it will be describing how we can help on those opportunities. So we will turn off the camera now, and I'll start the presentation. So it's opportunities in greenhouse gases. There are immense resources that are funding what we need to do. So the presentations are being hosted by me. My name is Jesse, and Michael Johnson. Maybe he will not be attending because he got pneumonia. So the emphasis here is on the business opportunities. Topics will be useful to all those attending. However, I must highlight, this is not a presentation to tell you there is or not climate change, or how is climate change going to affect the environment, or the consequences. That's not the presentation. The presentation is, there is a business opportunity, there are challenges that will entertain your profession to learn and do, and we are going to focus on those business opportunities. There are plenty of excessive amount of explaining climate change that's somewhere else. Let's see what people are not really focusing on, which is a business opportunity for environmental professionals. So we'll discuss the benefits, an overview of greenhouse gas. We will do some description of how we can help. So opportunity for zero carbon. You may have heard, everybody is trying to get zero carbon by 2050. That's 30 years from now. And we need imagining ourselves, what are the steps we need to do to get to carbon zero. So it is estimated, I was presenting at COP26, this is the conference of the parties. It was in Glasgow this year, and I presented, and the topic was focusing on this zero carbon, and that the economies throughout the world will have to invest, companies and governments, and over $200 trillion, and that number is not billions, that's $1 trillion to achieve net zero. We'll see when there is this shift in economical processes and money being available to that happen. There are great opportunities. We will see also, next slide, the opportunities in the United States. This year alone, the federal government allocated $550 billion for climate change programs. California has a carbon tax, and they are allocating every year $1 full billion per year. The Department of Transportation in the United States, just that department, has planned $6.4 billion over 5 years for greenhouse gases projects, climate change projects. So the funds are there. So let's see what we need to do to get to them. We need to be able to change and adapt, because we will do a lot what we know how to do. An example, if you're a specialist in emissions inventory, you need to adjust some other processes on your emissions inventory. If you are monitoring, you need to adapt to see if the changes that people say they made in greenhouse gas reductions are real. So we need to change and adapt to be able to compete. The opportunities are just immense. I'll describe a little bit here on the world greenhouse gases emissions, and then we go on where the opportunities are. The main issues, not the only ones, but the main ones are fossil fuels. So oil, we burn oil, we emit CO2 to the atmosphere. We burn coal, we emit CO2 to the atmosphere. But I want to highlight the people, and don't get me wrong, we need to go through natural gas. It's a cleaner burning, but natural gas leakage of 3%, and that number is correct, 3% of leakage of natural gas makes, in terms of greenhouse gas impacts, makes natural gas emit as much CO2 to the equivalent to the atmosphere as if you had a coal-fired power plant. I hope I do not need to repeat that. Natural gas emitting 3% on leakage since the exploration, the transmission, and then the storage, etc. 3% emits methane. Methane has a, we'll explain later what is a green GWP, global warming potential, 28 times more potent than CO2. And that methane going to the atmosphere will then, natural gas 3% emit as much CO2 as burning coal on a, if you're, let's say the purpose is generate electricity. So we need to shift to renewables. Today it's becoming easier because the goal of having renewables cheaper than fossil fuels is now a reality. So wind energy, solar energy are cheaper to generate electricity than using fossil fuel. So this then makes it easier to transition to renewable away from emitting CO2. Now, number 5 there, the World Trade Organization. Everybody that signed to that, and basically the whole world, forbids that countries impose tariffs as a barrier from importing products from other countries. However, the same agreement fully allows without any questions, putting barriers for products that contain a lot of CO2 emissions. Not the product itself contain the emissions, the products to manufacture use processes that emitted a lot. So let's say you are in a country that burn a lot of coal to produce a part. When that gets to a country, they say a lot of CO2 content in this product, I can legally, according to international agreement, block the product. So Europeans are already ahead of this, transitioning to hydrogen, for example, and I talk about hydrogen later, such that they can block all the products that have a high CO2 content. This is just showing that the energy matrix, this is 2018, but basically today, let's not go through these. It's just to show that it will be significantly different in 2050. So the solar that is nothing over here will be massive, and the wind, a lot of wind already, but the wind is nothing here, and so on and so forth. Okay, so even the natural gas that is massive, it will dwindle, and it's changing. So what are the greenhouse gases? Everybody remember carbon dioxide, and it's 79% of the global warming gases. It's not the only one. Methane, although in kilograms emitted, it's much less than CO2. You multiply that by 28, and it will then be a large number. And this is not a mistake. We are used to NO2 and NO3 and NO. This is actually, excuse me, nitrous oxide. So it's N2O. Also has a high 128, a high global warming potential. So it's just a trend. I talk with Americans and they are always desperate that they are not meeting things, but that's not true. This is in 1990, and you can see here the total emissions. This is all the greenhouse gases together, and we convert those to what we call CO2 equivalent, all CO2 equivalent. And there is a decline in 2020. Well, we had the pandemic, we know that. But there is a decline here. It now picked up again, but it's around this, around the, what was in 1990, which was the many commitments, international commitments. And this was not by policy. This was by the renewable going lower in cost, and now it's replacing as natural gas. Nobody gave incentives to replaced coal, and now going to replace natural gas later as a transitional fuel to renewables. Now, potential for 2050. This is global-wide. That was done by Bloomberg. And we can see some countries, very few of them. The highlighted in red is China will not be able to meet its requirements with renewables. Other countries in Europe will also not be able to meet. The United States will be a large exporter of renewable energy. And the export, for example, will be in terms of hydrogen. So business opportunities, emissions calculations, electricity, changing to other, and I'll show each one of the electricity where you will have opportunities. Transportation sector, you think it's going to be all electric and battery. That's not true. This electric and the Tesla cars and the other ones will be electrical, but we cannot have a truck, for example, being all electric. It has to travel every day around 300 miles. I had to carry a battery to do that for a truck. The battery itself will be more than half of the weight that the truck can carry. So we cannot have those. So the solution is transportation, trucks and trains could be electric by using transmission lines, but it will be hydrogen. And steel production, for example, will be hydrogen because you need high temperature. You need to replace the coal. The coal is not just to burn when you're doing steel, it's to react with the rust, basically get the oxygen out of the rust, so you leave the metallic iron. So we need to eliminate the carbon. The coke we use hydrogen. It's already being in use in Sweden and Germany using hydrogen. So there are a lot to be done: waste management, biodiversity and forestry, because we need to use more biomass. So the tools, carbon credits, there are billions of dollars being transacted every year. Not all countries will be incentivized to do that because governments are putting carbon tax. Carbon credits came out of the SO2 credits, the acid credits, if you will, was extremely efficient in reducing emissions of SO2. Because what is the credit? Let's say a silly example here, very simple, so nobody has to think hard about it. If I have a coal-fired power plant and the government says everybody has to reduce 10% of the emissions, and I replace my coal-fired power plant by natural gas, instead of 10%, I reduce my emissions of CO2 by 50%. But I only needed 10%, so I have 40% more reduction than I had to, so I can sell those for the coal-fired power plants that could not replace to natural gas. This is very effective because then people invest more to sell the credits, and then they can sell and recoup the investment, okay? Very efficient. A lot for professionals, let's say you do emissions and dispersion for traffic, intelligent transportation system, public transportation, changing to alternative fuels and see the impact. Some of them, like hydrogen, will be fuel cells and it'll be electric, but the electricity is from the hydrogen through fuel cells. So we need to analyze all those things as well as a professional. Waste management, methane captures on landfills, as example, reduction of fugitive emissions in the next 10 years. We must reduce it from about 6% of leakage total to about 1%. So a lot of work for everybody here in this group. Air conditioning replacement, where to replace, because for car, trucks, and they have air conditioner, the HFC was included to avoid the freons, which was destroying the ozone. But now HFC has a global warming potential of thousands, depending on the HFC, it's thousands. Industrial sources, this is new work galore for all of us in this field. So renewables, solar, wind, ocean, biomass, hydropower, geothermal, these are all going to be expanded by a factor of 10 or 50, depending where you are. Wind is already cheaper than fossil fuel, has a problem being intermittent. So we have gas-fired gas turbines to go on very quickly when the wind goes down. So we need, for example, meteorologists continuously forecasting for the sites It's not just going to the federal government and getting whatever it predicted that it will be. It must be localized. So you need to do modeling for the site all the time, real time and forecasting. A lot of work over there. Solar is also intermittent, clouds coming and blocking. It is intermittent because there are nights as well, we know that, but needs site assessment and continuous forecasting for clouds. Biomass, if you're doing fossil fuel now, you're still doing the studies because you need the permit, you need the licensing, you need also ecological studies because it may affect the local ecology. So there are combustion you need to see and do, and this will expand a lot. Biomass is also another thing that will reduce. Geothermal, today with the drilling technology that exists to get shale gas and shale oil drilling very deep and horizontally, there are almost everywhere in the world you can get a geothermal. Of course, there are locations like Iceland, you get it very shallow, so it's much cheaper. But if you go a few thousand meters, you get geothermal everywhere. Could be low temperature or high temperature. Iceland is high temperature and shallow. And in the United States, Hawaii would be a great place, but there are other places as well throughout the world, very, very cheap to do once you have the technology. Ocean is just no waves, there are tidals, and thermal. You can draw cold water, for example, for refrigeration on entire cities. Here in Toronto, it pumps cold water from the bottom of Lake Ontario, and that cold water then spread through the whole buildings of the whole downtown, and people do not have to cool with air conditioner. And then storage. If you use batteries, batteries are great for cars and homes that will have solar, and a large scale, you cannot use the lithium ion, you can use other one, flow batteries, iron batteries, etc. But all of them have a limited time. They will be for a day, 2 or 3. You have for a whole season. Let's say I have to have a lot of energy for winter to heat the homes, as an example. Then you have store hydrogen. Hydrogen is today the green hydrogen. You use wind and solar and other renewables, and you split water and you generate hydrogen on oxygen. The hydrogen is as cheap to produce today as using and developing hydrogen with natural gas. And this was due to the recent brutal increase on the price of natural gas. We need hydrogen for chemical processes that we're using coal right now. Steel production is one of them. We need for high temperature where you cannot just use electricity for 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. So you need the hydrogen. And storage, transportation for trucks and airplanes. If I have to do trans-ocean flights, I need hydrogen. I'll jump this. And all these, those that are in this presentation here, safety analysis, gonna have combustion, we need permitting. There's an immense market and massive amount of funding to all this. So keep an eye on that. I mentioned a few of them. I can email all of you with a specific funding that are out there, and we can email that to you. For the consulting side, I already told you, carbon trading need to do precise, it's very bureaucratic, it needs verification, and then the mitigation, adaptation, changing infrastructure, they are all necessary, work from all of you. Need to report, and our environmental regulations, but financial rules, SEC, companies in the stock exchange, they must report. Carbon trading, internal corporate, just for a good image, all of that. ISO 14,000, and the list goes on and on. So there's carbon markets, they are efficient, and carbon taxes. Governments like carbon taxes because they get the taxes and they spend. Throughout the world, observe that carbon taxes, they are not as efficient because they are not getting the taxes and investing on eliminating carbon emissions. And everybody says it's urgent. We know it is, but they say it's urgent. We are really focused on doing it. And then they invest in things that have nothing to do with reduction of carbon. Go throughout the world, almost all the governments are doing this. They get the carbon taxes, does not invest in reduction of carbon. But that's why they like it. And just the scope emissions, people hear about this. It's not a mystery. Scope 1 only means that it's your own emission. So for example, if I have a process in my industry that I burn fuels to heat stuff, my emissions are scope 1, those the burning. But if I am using electricity to run my fans and my pumps and my production, that's scope 2. So then you say you want to get from a clean site that has renewable, because then you're not saying you have higher emissions. But if it's from a coal-fired power plant, then you're going to get higher emissions on scope 2. Scope 1 and 2 are mandatory to report. Scope 3 is voluntary. It's not, people are not doing a lot of that. So these are global warming potentials. Just an example here. Carbon dioxide is the reference. When you get methane, then you multiply the kilograms you emit by 28. Nitrous oxide is now 265. It used to be 200. I used this number in the past, to 310, and then 298. It's being reduced. The 28, they're going to increase the methane even further. It used to be 21. I used those numbers in the past as well. Now the problem is there are too many standards. If you're doing California, you have the California standard. If you're doing Northeast, Australia has its standard. Europe has its standard. IPCC has its standard, and the list goes on and on. So it's a mess. So here is where we come to help. AQMIS. We cover most of these standards. So we cover the California, we cover the Australia, we cover the Europe, and so on and so forth. And we can adjust to specific needs. So it has tremendous benefits. We have done lots of those. Can visualize. It makes it easy to verify. If you're selling, you must verify. Verify is something that you also can get involved. There are companies that are certified to verify, and they must issue that it was audited and what was said is true. Now you can sell your credits. You cannot sell if it's not verified. And companies can become verifiers and do that. A lot of work on this front, massive amount. And we produce then dashboards. This is on-road emissions, for example, total GHG emissions, breakdowns, and everything that needs to be done. And then I generate reports for international or state, or if you're a company, produce to your state, or if it is for the SEC, produce the SEC, etc. So these are the benefits of AQMIS. Emissions calculations for all the methods. Can even do more precise than to help you than the methodology presented. They can be verified. Can monitor to see if what you said in reduction later on, because you need to keep track over time. And then you can, if you have monitors, you can show that. We can manage that. Can get your permit. Use maps to see if you have, for example, forestry or biomass or solar panels distributed, windmills distributed. You need the mapping to control all that. More of the type of reporting, roads and GHG. And that's, we will now have a live demo. And we're open for questions. Oh, it seems that I've been very clear. Didn't generate questions. Let me see here through other means. People will give me the questions. There's some questions on that I received through here. It is on types of reports. There are many types of reports, as I mentioned before. The SEC is a type of report. If you are selling credits, it's another type. And if you are reporting to the government, or if you have to have you're emitting a lot of greenhouse gas. It also depends how long your country has been implementing. If you're in Europe, it is very strict. In the United States, it's not as strict. I'm not saying it's lax. What I'm saying is it's not as strict. If you are even in different states in the United States, California is more strict than other states. Then the level of reporting changes. Question is, what is the biggest opportunity in the next 5 years? That is the single most important is on reducing emissions right now. And right now, that is the single most. We, for example, worked, and it's no longer an opportunity, but we worked on studying and reducing methane leakage. As I said, it's an immense problem, reducing methane leakage. Some other companies worked on destruction of HFC. I'll give you an example. A company invested $1.5 million on a burner, it's just a furnace, where it was burning natural gas, high temperature, and this HFC, it's refrigerants that we are now using in air conditioners. And then it was burning that. With that $1.5 million plus operational costs, which in a year would be on the order of $5 million, it could sell a total in 5 years of $1 billion US. And sold, made a lot of money. But that's not available anymore because governments now mandate. When the government mandate, that opportunity is gone, because then it would reduce the price of the carbon credit and people are not fixing other stuff, because then inflated the market with abundance of carbon credits. Methane leakage now, after COP26, that would be a great opportunity, reduce the leakage and then sell the credits. Now, in the next, until 2030, as these leakages must by law be fixed, and then there's no opportunity. But there is still a lot to be reduced. I got another and then do the carbon credits. This is the major, but there are so many processes that can be done. There are a lot of, for example, landfills. There are still a lot of them that you go there, suck the methane out of it and burn. That's an opportunity. There are wastewater. You could generate, for example, instead of just treat chemically, there are places doing it, but there are other places in the world not doing it. And then you put the bioreactor and generate biogas, which is just methane, let's say. There's CO2, but you can even take that out. And you can clean that gas and then use as power your fleet even. You can run trucks and vehicles with that biogas. Question is how lakes products like air mod and CalPAF be used in carbon reporting. It doesn't work. It's only our emission codes, for example, or monitoring codes for ambient monitor stations, our calculation methods. That one, there are places they want to see if there are exposure, but the regulations are done such that it's the total CO2 equivalent emitted to the atmosphere for the whole world, not if it is going to impact locally. It's the laws and regulations do not address that. I have another question, which is how large air emissions inventory can AQMIS handle? Let me tell you, and then ask if I can handle, we can handle thousands of sources. We can handle millions of sources. Now, I'll tell you some of the large projects that we handle. State of Minnesota, we handle 200,000 sources. We handle entire countries using our emissions inventory with thousands of sources, 50,000, 100,000 sources. We handle, for example, the Gulf of Mexico, which has just in oil platforms, 1,700 oil platforms. Each platform has dozens, if not hundreds of sources. We handle the ships, the helicopters. We handle all the processes. We can handle over 11,000 different processes they emit to the atmosphere. And now we compute all the greenhouse gases. We can compute as well at the same time the air toxics. So we have a major advantage. We handle complete steel mills, complete refineries. In Kuwait, for example, we handle maybe 50,000 sources, and they have 3 large refineries. They have thousands of oil exploration points. We handle all of them. All the processes in refineries. In Qatar, which is gas to liquids, Qatar doesn't have a lot of oil. I have massive amount of gas. So they convert the gas into high quality fuels. So the gas to liquids are a different process than just the oil refinery. We handle all the processes in Qatar, cities and roads and yes. Well, I don't see any other questions coming. So I would like to thank all of you for attending this presentation. And we will mail you with more information on the sources of funding for this. And the federal government, once more, we sell the IT solution. You guys are the expert. We can train on calculations for greenhouse gases, on methodologies, on all the steps, but we will leave this type of work on the calculations to you. We do we can even provide you the IT solutions for you to do it. We have AQMIS as a software as a service, such that you can register like you're doing with Gmail or Hotmail. You just create an account and you can access and do your calculations and your procedures you need to do for greenhouse gases in AQMIS. Thank you very much. I hope you have a nice rest of the week and success on obtaining greenhouse gas projects, because they will be the dominant thing you will be doing in the next 10 years. Thank you very much.